So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Hugh Anderson of Fourth Metrics. Hi, Hugh.
Hi, Adrian.
How you doing? Are you all right?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, Hugh, for the benefit of our listeners and readers, tell us a bit about you and the work that you do.
Well, thank you for the invitation, first of all, Adrian. It's great to be on the Rare Business Podcast.
My pleasure.
I am the co-founder of Fourth Metrics, and we have just launched our first product, which is called InkyBee. My background is actually it's a web. I'm a web entrepreneur now, essentially, but my background is actually in accountancy for my sins. I was a chartered accountant, Scottish chartered accountant, for a long time, working for what was the UK's last great and best brewery, Scottish in Newcastle. However, they fell by the wayside a few years back, and I went off on my own. I finished up as finance director of an internet search company, and by hook or by crook, myself and my business partner decided to set up on our own. So we've now been at Fourth Metrics for 2.5 years. We set up Fourth Metrics with an aim of creating new, simple web measurement tools, analytics tools for the web. And I think at the time we just spotted an opportunity. My business partner's a sort of digital savvy animal who's one of the first men to have an email address sort of thing. And the two of us got together with a bit of commercial nous and an idea that there's a lot of analytics out there at two levels, either a very simple web level, which is free, the likes of Google Analytics, or at an enterprise level, which is for the big companies in the world, the Fortune 500s and the FTSE 100s.
Right.
What we wanted to do was create something that could do measurement on the web of a variety of different things, and do it simply and do it easily and do it affordably for small business, which Fantastic. Is where we've got to.
You know, I've talked to you before or been in touch before about this new tool that you've been developing and piloting called InkyBee. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, InkyBee is our little brainchild, which is just coming to fruition. We've been at it over 2 years now, believe it or not. It was never intended to take this long, but that was the vagaries of software development. And it's back to this measurement piece. So initially we set out and we validated a need to measure communications on the web, because there's a lot of monitoring goes on. So a lot of people sort of track and monitor the buzz or the chatter or mentions on the web, but no one actually, or at a simple level, people find it difficult to get beyond that as to what the actual tangible value is. So we set about building something that would measure by way of providing more objective output measurements of online communications.
Right.
And by measure, I mean not just how many mentions. So at its simplest, you've got, boil it right down to complete simplicity. If you wanted to know how many times your brand or your company was mentioned on the web, you might set up a Google alert for it, and you'd get X number of mentions. What does that really tell you? Very little. So we're trying to get beyond that. Say, okay, that's how often it's mentioned, but what's the potential size of the audience that might have seen that? How engaged? What's the level of engagement with the stories that have mentioned your subject matter? And then actually right through to traffic data to understand what traffic has come back to your landing page or your website from all these different places that have mentioned your story. In theory, you could, through Google Analytics, you could then build that right through to an e-commerce solution could work out how many sales and ultimately an ROI. So we want to finish up. But that was the first piece we built. So we looked at building that measurement piece. As we went through that journey, we recognised, and we validated this principally with a lot of public relations professionals and sort of marketing, digital marketeers. And they all bought that and they all understood that. But what we discovered on the journey through was that there was also a significant hurdle that they were facing, which was they didn't know, or they struggled to find where to target their stories in the first place.
Right.
So the web is a huge place.
Yes.
The blogosphere in particular, we were looking at blogs, and people were trying to target blogs, and they didn't know where to go. So what we then sought to do was build the front end of what has become the front end of InkyBee, which is an engine to discover, based on relevancy and then on influence, what are the most relevant and then influential places to target those messages. So the result of all that, to cut a long story short,
yes,
is we have just launched the full public beta of InkyBee, and the principal functionality is for doing those two things. Understanding for digital marketeers and for public relations people where to target on the message, so it's a discovery engine. And then once they are aware of where they should be targeting the messages, it measures any campaign. So if it's an automated measurement machine that takes the campaign, automatically picks up where the story has been covered, and provides that back end measurement, all in a very simple, automated, user friendly user interface.
Okay. And so why do you think kind of blogging and blogger outreach is becoming more important?
Well, it's interesting. Certainly a few years ago, I knew very little about this, but it's the transformation of the comms industry is incredible, and the fact of how much of it is moving into the digital space, and it's just something that people can't afford to ignore anymore. Traditional media, obviously, clearly in days gone by, everything would have been read through. You would read your news and you would do your research through a newspaper or in traditional ways through the television. So much of it now is online that it's impossible to ignore. So it's ultimately the blogosphere. There is, for any brand, I would say just about any business on the planet, someone somewhere on a blog is talking about that market, not necessarily that brand, but that market, and therefore there's potential target audience out there. So to reach out and to find where your target audience is on blogs has become just a core part of that sort of digital outreach strategy.
Okay.
And blogs I think are sort of a hub of that as well. So social media is a huge animal, and people get frightened by it because there's so many different things to it. But actually the blog has become the hub of it. So if you have a really, you can become an authority on your subject matter on your blog.
Mm-hmm.
You can then spread those messages through all the different channels, whether that's Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, you name it. But actually, to find the hub of where you demonstrate your expertise and you demonstrate your authorities on the blog. The last thing I would say on all that, just quickly, is also the things that Google are doing by way of their different algorithm updates have impacted on this as well, because the SEO, search engine optimization industry, is changing radically as well, and what used to be horrible old black hat techniques of buying links and spamming have almost gone by the wayside because Google's got so clever at finding them and banning the sites involved. So now there's much more quality outreach required to find the right places to do link building and to build your SEO and to build your presence in search engines. And again, blogs are central to doing that.
And so how can businesses, whether small or large, do you think, use this tool to build their customer communities and their reach, and also to help build better relationships with the customers? It's how does that work? So that's sort of the sort of things that we explore and talk about on the blog.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you think that where's the application? Say if I'm a business owner, I'm thinking that all sounds interesting. How can I use that to help me build better relationships with my customers?
I think that's a good point. I think that's almost the next stage. So there's a couple of stages in the process that if you're new to this, the first thing is you might be missing an opportunity. So it's almost a business development tool. Find your target audience, and it's finding new customers ultimately, and it's finding where people are going to espouse about your brand or your product and get interested with them. So there's a kind of finding new markets thing in there. But also, I think once you've done that, I think the beauty of it, of working with bloggers, and this is where again social media and the kind of new digital relationship building techniques are critical, because it's not a one-off exercise of banging them a press release,
yes,
seeing if they publish it and leaving it at that. It's an ongoing relationship thing where you are creating and developing ambassadors for your brand and building communities. So it's an interaction thing where you can let your customers have their say. So it's building a community around whatever it is you're doing. And it might not be, and you might not use your brand. A small business might not necessarily even use their brand. They might use the market itself or one niche part of their market as the thing to hang the hook off what people are interested in, and build a community on that around social media, somewhere on social media, and also the bloggers and the blogosphere. So they can interact with the bloggers, and you've got people there that are espousing and providing credible authority from a third-party perspective. And I think that, from a small business perspective, is critical. In fact, from any business perspective, I think that there's a bit of a breakdown in trust at the moment in the world.
Right.
On a number of fronts, on sort of high-level stuff from governments to big banks, as we all know.
Yes.
And just but ultimately, I think that's feeding through into all levels of business, where everybody now looks for any sort of material purchase, looks for a bit of word of mouth or third party verification.
Right. So
And I
it really
think
is all
that's the
about sort of
kind of thing.
building endorsement
Yeah,
and advocacy via third parties in a way.
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a huge amount of that now, and I think that's hugely important. And as I say, not as a one off process,
Yeah.
but as something where there's something everyone can contribute to it, so a customer can be involved in that community along with a blogger and all of that, and it's a kind of virtuous circle of development and growth.
And
Um,
this is not just, or is this just for big brands and agencies, or is
Not at all.
does it apply at all levels?
Complete opposite. I would say this is where yes, big brands and agencies can throw at stuff at this, but the opportunity here is for the little guys, and that's where we're focused with InkyBee as well, because the big brands and agencies clearly have deeper pockets and can muscle their way through using advertising.
Uh huh.
If you're a small business or a small brand and you don't have the necessary resources to do all that stuff, you can actually do this and create this. What's the word? Create this.
Well, it's like links, isn't it? It's like links to people to influencers in a way.
It is, yeah, but it's more than that. I think it's create this community
Uh huh.
that creates a positive, engenders a positive marketing around and messaging around their business
Right.
without having an astronomical marketing budget. So it's called earned media for a reason. It's not paid media.
Yes.
So they're not that people marketers don't have to pay bloggers hundreds of thousands of pounds because they don't want that. It's about authentic, credible, independent verification, and that's part of the beauty of it. And I think that's why actually it's more applicable and gives a leg up to the smaller brands and smaller agencies personally.
So it is a bit like it's almost empowering smaller businesses or smaller agencies to punch above their weight in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also the approach we've taken with InkyBee.
Uh huh.
So we have actually got some interest from some of the bigger players
Uh huh.
because it just slots into their other analytics solutions. But the intention was always to help smaller businesses, and particularly the PR industry. So public relations is a highly fragmented industry. So there's a few big players around the globe, but actually there's a vast number of small operators, independent agencies, one or two man bands, or a bit slightly larger.
Right.
And one, they simply can't afford the big analytics solutions, and two, they need to be creative, and they need to be their clients are smaller businesses, and they need to be more creative and find ways of doing this.
Yeah.
And that's why we created InkyBee with them in mind to make it simple and affordable.
So that sounds great. I mean, but if I was to ask you to sort of boil it down a little bit and say, what would be your top tips for say managers, executives, or entrepreneurs running their own business that want to get the most out of their outreach and sort of blogger relations and try and build their word of mouth, as it were, and their advocacy? Where would you say what would you say would be your top three tips, as it were?
Well, firstly, they need to understand what they're doing, I suppose. But that's so go and read our ebook. But that's
Right.
When it gets to come to actually do it, I think number one would be understand what your objectives are. Set your objectives. There's no point in doing an outreach campaign with a fluffy objective that you don't know whether you've achieved it or not. So, are you trying to get more downloads of an ebook? Are you trying to literally deliver more sales? Are you trying to deliver more brand advocacy and awareness? What are your objectives? Point two is do your research.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's not a sort of scattergun approach where you use a newswire to send out 300 press releases.
No.
It's a rifle shot to the niche key target places where your target audience is residing. So research and find where those places are, and then you'll reap the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose the last one is be patient and work at it. So someone in the organisation just needs to have the time to dedicate a small amount of time on a daily or weekly basis just to keeping the thing moving. It's not an overnight solution, as I say, where you bang something out on day one and you get a result 2 days later. It takes time to build relationships and to build a community and to build that advocacy. So I think it's be patient and work at it is what I would say.
So it's not like a one night stand then?
Absolutely not. Completely opposite. You need to show a bit of leg, but then you've got to keep going for a long time after that.
I think the one thing I would add as a blogger is that to make sure that people understand that when you reach out, you've got to, as you rightly say, do your research, but also do your research on them and figure out what they're
Yeah,
interested in, and realize that actually they might not be that interested in you,
yeah,
but you've got to make it make sense for them, and that's where you almost do your homework up front. Because if you just spam people with
yeah,
press releases and outreach and stuff, which I get quite a lot of,
yeah,
it's just boring.
yeah. Absolutely. We see it over and over again, and it's a shame because the PR industry is getting a bad rap for it at the moment because that's kind of old ways of working that still are. There's too much of it out there.
Yeah,
But you're spot on. I think the research isn't just who's relevant, but how do you approach them? What do they talk about? And ultimately, it's not it's got to be something that is of interest to them. So whatever your story is, whatever your content is, it's got to be relevant and interesting to their readers. It's got to educate them or interest them or amuse them.
hmm
You've got to put your story and your whatever you're doing in the context of is it interesting to their readers, not just spamming them with here's our product or here's our whatever it is. There's got to be a hook for the audience.
yeah. I mean, I would also kind of suggest that because this is much more personal marketing in a way,
Mm-hmm.
is that many people will get to the point where, because it is so personal, we have this very human fear of rejection.
Yeah,
It's one of our greatest
yeah,
fears, I
yeah,
think. And many people don't do it because they get hung up on the idea that somebody will say no, not interested.
yeah,
And I think I would suggest, and tell me what you think about this, is I tell you what, just to start and get over it,
yeah,
because pretty likely that your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your wife or your husband or your partner or whatever was probably not the first person that you met and wasn't the first person to say yes.
indeed. I completely agree. There's something in that. It's ultimately bloggers are humans.
Yeah,
It's not a they're not machines that go oh yeah like that go and they will automatically because it ticks the boxes they'll go with it. Everyone has a million other things in their business lives and their personal lives going on, and if it's not doesn't fit for whatever reason, you might not ever find out. Yeah, prepared to just take it on the chin and move on.
hmm
I think there's definitely something in that. If you do it correctly and you work out and you empathise and you work with them correctly, then your success rate should be high enough that you can stand that sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose from an emotional perspective, there is a certain amount of that you have to understand and live with. Yeah, absolutely.
I would also kind of suggest that the other thing is that speaking as a blogger, as it were, thinking about what would be the best thing for blogger outreach is, if you want to make yourself stand out, send them something and then phone them up,
Yeah,
because it makes it personal.
yeah,
And if even if you did that as a business or as a PR agency or somebody, an agency helping out a business or a marketing department in a business, that would make you stand out. Just that,
yeah,
calling
absolutely,
somebody up and saying hello.
absolutely. So you can't overrate the personal approach. I think there's they are humans, and that's essential in the whole business of getting this right and making sure that you build meaningful relationships.
Yes.
So things that don't you're not spamming anyone. You're trying to build it because you have a common interest and you have common needs and requirements around it, whatever the subject matter is.
hmm So, Hugh, is there anything else you'd like to add on
Um,
InkyBee?
well, I think would love people to get would love feedback on InkyBee. It's just gone into its full public beta. We're moving to a paying model shortly, but it's doing some great stuff. There's a lot more great stuff to do. The only thing I would add really is don't be scared of the phrase blogger outreach. It's kind of a some people don't like that phrase, and you can call it different things, whether it's influencer outreach or whatever you want to call it, digital outreach. Don't be scared of that. Bloggers are humans. Find out and understand what the process is, and be human in the whole thing. That's probably all I would say.
Excellent. And so, I think you might have just preempted my final question, but there's the one before the question I want to ask before that one was. So tell me what's Forth Metrics and your plans for 2013 and beyond, apart from world domination, of course?
Maybe not in 2013, but shortly thereafter. No, we obviously it's all about InkyBee right now. We've got some amazing stuff still to do with it. It's doing a fabulous job right now. We have to make that work for everyone that's using it and grow it. It's a global tool. We've got interest from all over the planet. We've got people using it all over the world. And we think we can do some very clever stuff which will really help the digital communications industry. We want to educate people, we want that really to grow. So at the moment it's all about InkyBee. We've then got some very clever stuff under the lid, but I won't bore you with science. If we get some of that away, then it just helps the whole proposition of relevance and making sure people really can understand their communities and build around communities better. So there's a lot more to come under that, but it's for the time being, it's all about InkyBee.
Fantastic. And so my final question, which I always add in, and I want to just add in, even though you might have sort of preempted it sort of earlier, is there anything that you'd like to shamelessly plug?
Well, I think you can guess the answer. There's kind of only one thing right now that's important to us, which is InkyBee. So yes, if people get the chance, and as I say, it's not purely for PR agencies, although that's the primary target audience. There's a lot of people in there just researching their niches and using it for business development, finding out blogs that are of their interest to them in their different markets. So go and play with InkyBee. That's INKYBEE.com. Or we're on Google+, we're on Facebook, inkybee.outreach. So there's lots of places you can find us, but go and have a play. There's lots of educational material on there, so I would like to shamelessly plug InkyBee, if I may, Adrian. Thank you.
No, that's absolutely fine. I mean, we'll make sure we get that all sort of linked up and everything else, so we can give you a big sort of shout out and point people over to the ebook as well, and then to improve sort of if people want to educate themselves before diving into the tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Hugh, thank you for that. That's been fantastic.
It's really a great pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, Adrian.
All right.